Hi, everyone. This week, we'll explore this very important topic called cultural communication. We'll see how you will put this in context, especially as you'll be working on an important project with your big team members in relation to your startup or nonprofit organization. I believe this topic will provide you so many insights, most especially when it comes to communicating with people from different parts of the world and those who have actually unique cultural backgrounds. So, let's talk about cultural communication then. In this case, in the future, perhaps, whether you're working in an international business or education, perhaps, or even just interacting with people from different backgrounds, it is imperative that understanding how culture shapes, especially when it comes to communication, can make a huge difference. So I believe it's really important for us in this recording or in this lecture that we'll dive into the key concepts that you will tackle this week. First up, let's talk about diversity. This means recognizing and valuing differences in age, gender, ethnicity, religion, education, and more. According to Tim Toomey, based on his research in 1999, effective in intercultural communication starts with cultural awareness and respect for diversity. It's basically about appreciating how these differences shape our perspectives and interactions. But why is it that communication sometimes it fails? Why does this happen? According to Hofstede, in a work that he published in 2001, he explains that when communicators fail to realize cultural differences in thinking, acting, or expressing ideas, they risk being seen as insensitive or ignorant. Misunderstandings, therefore, can lead to lost opportunities and tension during meetings or social gatherings. So, I believe that when it comes to cultural misunderstandings, one must have to bear in mind that when you lead yourself into conflicts with people at the communication level, most especially at the cultural communication level, you will lose a lot of things, by the way. So, this is where the need for understanding the three approaches to cultural communication comes in. There are three key approaches to this. First, let's talk about multicultural communication. Now, this one involves people from different cultures living or working alongside one another, but without deep engagement. According to Samovar, Porter, and McDaniel, in a research conducted in 2017, they highlight that multicultural settings promote coexistence, but not necessarily understanding. I know at this point, some of you perhaps are quite confused. Can you give us further detail to understand what multicultural communication is? Somehow provide us an illustration, a scenario. Why don't we use this one as an example? How about organizing a global conference? And in this context, let's see how multicultural communication is displayed by the following individuals. So, let's just say that a team of professionals in an international company is organizing a global conference. The team includes Maria from Spain, Ahmed from Egypt, and May from China. Each member represents their own cultural background. and they have to work together to plan the event. And during their meeting, Maria suggests incorporating flamenco music as part of the entertainment, while Ahmed proposes a traditional Egyptian dance, and May suggests, how about a Chinese tea ceremony? What do you think? In this case, then, the characters coexist and recognize the presence of multiple cultures. These two may discuss and respect each other's cultural traditions without necessarily engaging in deeper, meaningful exchanges or trying to integrate or adapt to one another's cultures. Therefore, multicultural communication necessitates an environment where various cultures are acknowledged and exist alongside each other. But here's the difference. There is little interaction beyond surface level exchanges. So when it comes to multicultural communication, people live alongside one another, but each cultural group does not necessarily have engaging interactions with each other. And in this case, for example, in a multicultural neighborhood, to add more to your understanding, people may frequent ethnic grocery stores and restaurants without really interacting with their neighbors from other countries. Maybe just a simple nod or saying the word hi or hello will do, just to create a harmonious meeting with each other, but not necessarily talking about each other's cultural uniqueness. Now, that's the case of multicultural communication. It's another story if you talk about cross-cultural communication. This approach emphasizes recognizing and navigating differences in communication styles, norms, and values. Hall, in a research conducted in 1976, introduced the concept of high context and low context cultures, showing how cultural frameworks influence how messages are sent and received. Don't worry, we will have a separate discussion on high context and low context cultures. So, why don't we put this in context? Let's just say a business meeting. So, let's say James, an American consultant, travels to Japan for a business meeting with Yuki, a Japanese client. Now, James is aware of the cultural differences between the American and Japanese business practices, particularly regarding directness and formality. So James researches Japanese communication styles, such as the importance of bowing and the use of honorifics, like Mr., Miss, Doctor, or other titles. During their meeting, James makes a conscious effort to communicate respectfully according to Japanese cultural norms, while Yuki is aware of James's cultural background and accommodates by speaking in English and clarifying key points to avoid misunderstandings. Now, this scenario illustrates cross-cultural communication, where individuals from different cultures actively work to communicate with one another, taking into account cultural differences to avoid misunderstandings. It involves understanding and recognizing, of course, the unique cultural frameworks and adjusting one's communication style accordingly. So, that statement, I don't speak English, may not work in the context of this approach to cultural communication. In other words, cross-cultural communication necessitates awareness, sensitivity to cultural differences, and proactive efforts to bridge communication gaps. Cross-cultural communication, therefore, are understood if you talk about differences, and these differences are acknowledged and can bring about individual change, but no collective transformations. Bear that in mind. Cross-cultural relations, therefore, are where people reach across cultural boundaries, build relationships, share, listen, learn, and are open to change. This usually requires specific drivers, like business, educational programs, or community building events. Remember in one lecture that I made for you guys about the key drivers of globalization? Yep, cross-cultural communication, by the way, is directly related and affected by the key drivers of globalization. Differences are understood and acknowledged, and can bring individual change, but not to collective transformations. Last but not least, let's talk about intercultural communication. Now, this is the most dynamic form where people actively exchange ideas, adapt, and build relationships across cultures. According to Gudekunst's research in 2005, anxiety uncertainty management theory, which is one theory that he actually developed based on this study, explains how managing uncertainty can lead to more effective intercultural communication. To further understand this theory, this anxiety uncertainty management theory, why don't we put this in context? How about a university exchange program? So, during a university exchange program in Canada, Lucy from Australia and Carlos from Brazil are assigned as roommates. Now, I know some of you here probably are thinking, is it possible for two roommates belonging to, having different genders? Well, hypothetically speaking, let's put it that way. Now, both come from different cultural backgrounds with distinct attitudes towards punctuality, social norms, and food preferences. Carlos is used to eating dinner late, while Lucy prefers early dinners. Now, as they spend time together, they discuss their cultural differences openly and adapt to each other's preferences. Lucy agrees to try later dinners occasionally, while Carlos learns to appreciate Lucy's early dinner habits. So in this case, this scenario shows intercultural communication where there is a dynamic ongoing process of exchange, learning, and adaptation between individuals from different cultural backgrounds. They exchange in dialogue to understand each other's cultures better, of course, and adapt their behaviors to coexist harmoniously. Intercultural communication then necessitates active engagement, mutual respect, empathy, and a willingness to adapt to cultural differences. In other words, intercultural communication focuses on the mutual exchange of ideas and cultural norms and the development of deep relationships. So people from different cultural groups then develop mutual interest to interact with one another and, of course, learn and grow together, while relationships are shaped and molded from each other's experiences. In this case, then, the focus is on relationship building, not individual gains. And when relationship building occurs, learning from one another happens. So, the relationship is bidirectional in nature. So, those three key approaches are the best approaches for cultural communication. But let's not only end up at this point understanding these three key approaches to cultural communication. Let's also put in mind the concepts of co-cultures and cultural adaptation. When you say co-cultures, Within any culture, by the way, there are co-cultures, which refer to groups that differ in some way from the dominant culture. And there are three common responses, by the way, to co-cultures. We have cultural assimilation. This is when um, individuals try to fit into the dominant culture, sometimes by giving up their own cultural practices. Cultural accommodation happens when people maintain their cultural identity while forming relationships with the dominant group. On the other hand, resistance or separation happens when members of a culture resist interacting with the dominant culture. So, among these three, which do you think is the most appropriate when you are part of a cultural existence? Well, if this happens to you, you call the shots. It's all up to you. But if I were to have my own way, it should be between or either or both perhaps cultural assimilation and cultural accommodation. So to summarize the key differences in relation to these three approaches to cultural communication, multicultural communication is about coexistence without deep interaction. Cross-cultural communication focuses more on understanding differences. And intercultural communication involves active engagement and mutual learning. So that's the case of these three approaches to cultural communication. Finally, I would like to share this with you. Remember the ART approach. Accept, respect, tolerate. Accept cultural differences without judgment. Respect diverse perspectives. And most importantly, tolerate ambiguity when communication styles clash. Following this approach will help you navigate cultural interactions with empathy and understanding. So, as you work on this week's tasks, keep these concepts in mind, and I encourage you to reflect on your own cultural experiences and think about how they shape your communication. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via Google Classroom or email. Let's make this, dear students, a productive and insightful week. See you soon. For those who are wondering, these are the references that helped shape my presentation in this lecture. So I advise you to research these references online or at the library to further understand the three key approaches to cultural communication. Thank you for your time, guys. Take good care of yourselves, and don't forget to be kind always to one another. God bless all of you.